Greetings, science fiction and fantasy enthusiasts. Do you read books? Do you watch films? Do you hate deodorant? Then welcome to our podcast. You're listening to No Deodorant in Outer Space with Ryan Sean O'Reilly. Now, let's get started.
The fire, baby. It'll burn us both. It'll kill us both. There's no place in this world for our kind of fire. My warrior woman, my Valkyrie, you'll always be mine. Always and never. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, and welcome to another edition of No Deodorant in Outer Space. My name is Ryan Sean O'Reilly, and joining me once again is Rob Lloyd.
Hey!
And David Wilkinson.
What is going on, monkeys?
Oh, that's clipping pretty loudly. So, we are back for the second half of our episode where we are covering Sin City, the movie editions, Sin City and A Dame to Kill For, from our previous episode where we covered the graphic novels written by Frank Miller. Now we're going to do the movies directed by Robert Rodriguez and Frank Miller. We introduced everyone last time, so we don't have to reintroduce everyone here now for this episode. But I know you guys are both excited. You're here in town. Tomorrow you're going to see Pearl Jam. You talked about your favorite songs. Any other hopes or aspirations for the weekend as you're visiting me, besides not getting murdered?
Yeah, survival is really the goal.
I want to see what George's porch smells like. And tomorrow I'm going to go on his porch and sit on it and take a picture of me on his porch and send it to him. And
that's our friend George.
Yeah.
Maybe. Are you looking for the smell of the porch area, or are you actually going to sniff the wood?
I want to get George out of his house, and I'm not sure how to do that.
Did you try offering him free tickets to Pearl Jam?
Or fire? Have you tried fire?
No, you guys are all too cool for Pearl Jam. That's the problem.
George?
Beam's going to go.
George said he's too cool?
George doesn't want to go see Slayer for a second time. I mean, he's not... I don't know. You guys don't have that...
He is too cool. You're right.
I mean, I love Pearl Jam, not because they're like the best band in the world. I just really like going to see them. I'm excited for the show. I have nothing but good memories associated with them. And then one of my good friends, she got me to go on a plane. I didn't fly for 10 years, and I wanted to go see Pearl Jam when they were on tour, and they're going to be in Cleveland. This is back in 2010. And I hadn't flown since 2001. And I had a bad experience on a flight, and I just refused to fly, and it really kind of...
2001?
Yeah, nothing to do with 9/11. I just had a bad experience flying back from a country, and
I remember that. I remember you talking about that.
Yeah, the oxygen mask dropped in the plane. We all thought we were going to crash and die. It was over the Swiss Alps, and then the plane righted itself, and it was like a air pressure situation, and we continued like a 9-hour flight. That was half an hour into it.
Sin City or Alive? So are we doing Sin City or Alive?
No, we didn't crash. No, but then so she's like, well, instead of going to Cleveland, let's go to New York and see him. I'm like, fine. And then I got a plane ticket, and I don't know. So somehow this person in Pearl Jam were enough to get me on a plane again, and since then I've done a lot of traveling, seen a lot of family, and it got me back to flying, and I kind of associate Pearl Jam and this person with that, and I don't know. It's fun to see a band from my youth who really enjoys what they do. I mean, like so many bands. I mean, and we're all good friends with the band Here I Decline, and they play a show about once a year, and it's good to see them. But like so many bands that are successful from 20, 30 years ago, they do a show and they just go through the motions. They'll play the same set list, they'll do the same songs, they kind of hate each other, and they'll it's like they'll punch in, they'll punch out for the paycheck. Pearl Jam, they just show up, they write the set list the night before, they don't have any stage show, they'll do like between 30 and 40 songs, covers, they'll talk to the crowd, they raise a lot of money for charity, and every show is different and unique. And
are you saying that old musicians don't necessarily care for the people that they partied with for 35 years when they were in their early 20s?
I've seen a lot. I mean, I saw Soundgarden at the end. It was kind of depressing. They didn't seem like they were that into it. I've seen Guns N' Roses, which is just like a Spinal Tap thing.
It's the most accurate description I can think of.
Yeah, I mean, I got to see Roger Waters do The Wall, which was pretty cool. That wasn't bad at all, but like, I don't know. So often it's just hit and miss with bands that I liked, and when I want to see them again, it's I saw Marilyn Manson do a show. He played 9 songs and started up the stage.
Sweet.
Billy Corgan's an asshole. I don't want to see him.
So that kind of makes me think about Sin City versus A Dame to Kill For when we're talking about Jessica Alba in both, because she was clearly a highlight of the first movie and definitely was less so in the second film.
Oh, I don't know. She was featured pretty well in the second film.
Yeah, she definitely. And they might have needed to cut that role down a touch.
Well, let's get into it. So I'll start us off like usual with our opening quotes. I'll read mine, and then you guys can say yours. You kind of sum up your thoughts. So mine is, the first film is an innovative realization of Miller's noir comic that is raw and grungy in its perfection. Perfect example of a literal adaptation. However, the second film labors to live up to this and feels weighed down by the action sequences while struggling to recapture what made the first one so special, though it's a decent enough flick that is also faithful to the source and content. Wilk, what about you? Any initial thoughts about the two movies?
Well, I mean, I saw Sin City, the movie, before I read the comic book, or graphic novel.
It's the same for me, too.
And to me, it really kind of, it was nice to read the graphic novel after the fact, and the first Sin City was very influential to me. It still is. I like it. It's in my mind a fairly enjoyable, perfect, flawless movie for what it's trying to do. And I've watched it multiple times, and I enjoyed rewatching it for this podcast. I then watched A Dame to Kill For, which I've been avoiding for since it came out. I'm looking at the year. When did it come out?
14?
Yeah, 14.
Yeah,
14.
And I made a point of not seeing the theater or not watching it on Netflix. I watched it about a week and a half ago, and it was exactly what I thought it was going to be, which was disappointing. But I don't know. I think if you catch lightning in a bottle, you should leave it in the bottle and not try and ruin it.
Okay. Rob, what about you?
So I think I had the benefit of reading the comic books before seeing the movies. And I thought it was the first movie was a brilliant adaptation that really it brought to life those images that already were painting a very vivid picture. And the second one continued in that same vein, but it had less impact. And I think part of that may be due to the time frame in which it was released, which was 9 years later.
Yeah, I think that's correct. The movies were directed by Robert Rodriguez and Frank Miller. But let's go into the bio portion of the podcast. We're going to talk about Robert Rodriguez. He was born June 20th, 1968. Like Miller, he's still alive. His early life, he was born in Texas. He's the son of Mexican parents. His mother was a nurse, like Miller, and his father was a salesman. In a podcast I listened to, he talked about how his father was very motivated to make unit sales, and his father would he was a self-made kind of man. I mean, that's how sales positions can be. And if one of his kids needed braces, he knew exactly how many units of something he needed to sell to make that pay. So he was very motivated by that kind of stuff. And I think all the kids, including Rodriguez, ended up kind of working for themselves, and that's how their life trajectory went after that. Early in his life, he was commissioned to record high school football games, but he got fired from that for his first gig because he decided to be more cinematic. He showed the ball being caught and all this stuff, and he didn't realize that all he was supposed to do was show the plays so that the coach could review it or whatever. So he got let go. He eventually went to college in Austin. He started off in cartooning and did a strip called Los Hooligans, which I think eventually was the first name of his production company. It ran for 3 years in the student newspaper. It was popular. He based it on his siblings. His father started his interest in film by buying him a VCR and a camera, and he went on to do early editing work with just using 2 VCRs. He loved doing short action and horror films, and in 1991 he won a local film contest, earning him a spot at the university film program despite his bad grades. The film was called Bedhead, which he shot it on 16 millimeter. You can find it on YouTube. I don't know if you guys watched that. I found it on YouTube and watched it. It's just a little short little film. It's got his characteristic quick cuts and intense zooms. There's fast camera movements, and there's also humorous elements and supernatural elements and stuff. It's just about a girl and her brother who's got crazy bedhead and how she's going to take revenge on him. But it was an innovative little film, short, and it got him noticed. In 1992, he made sort of a landmark film called El Mariachi. He only intended it to be a film for the Spanish market.
Direct-to-video.
Direct-to-video. El Mariachi is I think it loosely translates to the guitar player. And so he thought, it's just going to be called The Guitar Player, and people who like action films are not even going to want to watch it. But his whole thing with it is that he only spent $7,000 to make this movie. He raised the money with a friend participating in a medical test. He ended up making, I think, half the money by testing this drug that lowered cholesterol. I think the drug's on the market now. I think it might have been Lipitor.
I think you're right.
Yeah. So because he made the movie so cheaply, he ended up getting noticed and winning an award in, I believe it was Sundance, the Audience Award in 1993. Columbia Pictures ended up taking on the film. I think they at first wanted him to redo it, but then they thought they would screen it as is. And it was so popular, and everyone knew this as the film that was only made using $7,000, that they decided to just go with it as opposed to just having him redo it. And that was never his intention. He never thought people would see this film. But they did some post-production work, and they ended up distributing the film. He wrote about his experience making this film so cheaply in a book called Rebel Without a Crew. I know my cousin Mike, who's been on the podcast, Mike O'Reilly, who's also an independent filmmaker, has read that book and loves Robert Rodriguez. That came out in 1995. Robert Rodriguez, he really wanted to show people what was possible, because that's like something he would have liked to know when he was doing things. And when he was getting all this exposure from this, he made the statement that, the film industry was going to change after that. And I think it was true. Like after El Mariachi came out, these film festivals were flooded with people who were like, oh, I can do this too. It was a whole like kind of DIY, do-it-yourself movement. This all is kind of akin to his style. He's sort of like an innovator, just like Frank Miller. He does multiple roles on his films. He'll shoot his own movie posters and trailers on set, and he'll use other principals on the set to do multiple roles. He likes to let things flow and kind of fly by the seat of his pants. Like one of the things he'll do, I heard him talk about, is he'll have his actors paint things between takes when there's downtime, just to keep them in the creative mode. So he likes to kind of keep a positive environment and just kind of go with things, and he cherishes mistakes. He's just a self-made kind of guy. He's released a series of segments for aspiring filmmakers called the 10-Minute Film School, and I've seen some of those on YouTube. You can watch one on El Mariachi. He kind of explains some of the major points of it and how he did it and how he did it so cheaply. So that's kind of cool to check out. I'll put a link on the website for that. Interestingly enough, he inspired Kevin Smith to stop working on the script Dogma and make the film Clerks, because Clerks was based on a convenience store and Kevin Smith worked at a convenience store. And when Robert Rodriguez came out with El Mariachi and got all this success, Kevin Smith was like, that's what I should do. I should work with what I have access to. I work at a convenience store. I should write a movie about that. So that came out. And then that kind of reminds me of Frank Miller inspiring the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Yeah.
So since he was so successful at that, he eventually kind of got into the mainstream, and they did make Desperado in 1995, starring Antonio Banderas and introducing...
95, wow.
Yeah, introducing Selma Hayek, and that was a sequel to El Mariachi. He friended Quentin Tarantino when he was on the film circuit with El Mariachi, and that was a fortuitous friendship. Quentin Tarantino was shopping around Reservoir Dogs, while Rodriguez was shopping around El Mariachi. They eventually collaborated to make From Dusk Till Dawn, which launched George Clooney's film career and had 2 sequels and eventually became a TV series on Rodriguez's cable network, El Rey. So that was a very successful franchise that he ended up working on and collaborating with Quentin Tarantino of Pulp Fiction fame. They also both worked on the box office failure 4 Rooms, which was an anthology movie.
That movie was so good, though.
Was it?
Yeah, yes.
It just didn't do well in the box office.
No, but it was stellar.
It was like 4 directors and 4
and
rooms.
Each one had their own room.
But they were all connected by the bellhop, right?
Yeah.
It was Cummings, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And each one is fantastic and highlights the skills of the Tarantino room specifically is just great.
Outer Limits episode, right? The lighter?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
That was a good flick.
Yeah. And those 2 directors specifically really brought around the independent film movement that it changed the face of film entirely.
Yeah, Rodriguez was really a fan of short films, and he liked the idea of doing anthologies, but I guess looking back on it, he's like, yeah, maybe I should have researched that anthology films always kind of don't do well. Doesn't matter who's involved with them. So 4 Rooms didn't work commercially, although it might have been satisfactorily to them.
But the budget for that movie couldn't have been that bad. It made some profit, but it was not like there's no CGI or raptors coming through the doors.
There were no raptors in that movie.
Well, Rodriguez, he never looks at these things as total failures. He feels like he learns things from his quote-unquote mistakes or whatever. I mean, I'm kind of just like paraphrasing like what I've heard him talk about. But I think, did he use Antonio Banderas in Four Rooms?
Yes.
He was the father of,
Yeah.
of a petulant child.
Yes. Out of Four Rooms, he got the idea to do Spy Kids, which became a huge successful franchise for him later. So he never looks at his mistakes as like failures. He's always like, this can benefit me sometime later. And also it led him to do Sin City, which is essentially an anthology movie.
Yeah.
Like a couple of stories weaved together.
Well, and I mean, Pulp Fiction is an anthology movie if you really view it through that lens. I mean, I don't know. Yeah. I mean, they can be. The 90s did see a trend in anthology movies, but I'd say Rodriguez and Tarantino really kind of, more so than the Sundance Film Festival, they really push independent filmmaking into the mainstream in the 90s, I mean, at least for me.
I think you're right. They inspired a whole generation of people who could make movies for $7,000. I think Kevin Smith I saw an interview where he said he was motivated, but he was a little disappointed because he was like, I spent like $25,000 to make Clerks, and I feel like a jerk because this guy did it for $7,000. And it's an incredible mindset.
Yeah,
and they really find ways to be successful.
Oh God! I mean, he literally worked at the store. His buddy stole the film. He maxed out his credit cards. I love the story of Clerks. I love Clerks.
Yeah, and none of that happens without Rodriguez.
So Rodriguez eventually goes on to do The Faculty, which I think was that a Weinstein project? And the producers of that, they kept bugging him to do stuff. He was a sought-after director. So he finally told them, look, if you greenlight 5 of my films, I'll do one of yours. And they said yes. So he did The Faculty, which came out in 1998. Then in 2001, he went and did Spy Kids, which was his first big Hollywood hit, and later became a successful franchise. And he based that on his family. And he talked about in his interview that like he wanted to do it based on his family, and he got he got some pushback saying like, well, why don't you make all the characters white? And he was just like, no, like this works how it is. And he was right. It became successful. He operates a production company out of Austin called Troublemaker Studios. It was formerly Los Hooligans, based on his comic that he did when he was younger. I remember hearing him talk about George Lucas, who at some point allowed him to try some digital cameras at his headquarters. But I think it was George Lucas who told him, don't be in Hollywood. Stay outside of Hollywood so you can kind of do your own thing. You're not influenced by all this stuff. That's when he went and did Sin City, which we'll get into later, which was a big success when he collaborated with Miller on that. He also did in 2005 The Adventures of Shark Boy and Lava Girl, which was a kid's superhero movie, kind of like Spy Kids, but it was also a huge success. And he credited his 7-year-old son for writing the script on that. In 2006, he ended up splitting from his wife of 16 years, Elizabeth Evelayan. I'm probably pronouncing her name correctly, but she's continued to produce his films for at least a while. They have 5 kids together. In 2007, he worked on Planet Terror with Quentin Tarantino as well. Again, another collaboration with his friend.
That and Death Proof, right? Released as a double feature.
Yep. Yeah, it was a double feature. And then in 1994, he did an early version script of, in 2010, the movie Predators came out. It was based on an early version script that he had written in 1994 when he was waiting around to make Desperado, I believe. So this was intended to be a sequel to the original Predator movie, as opposed to the Aliens versus Predators.
The Predator 2 with Gary Busey.
Is that who was in Predators?
Predator 2 was Gary Busey and
Lethal Weapon, Danny Glover.
Yeah, Adrian Brody is in Predators.
Yeah.
Predators is it's a horror movie, though.
Yeah, I heard it was good.
It's good.
Yeah, I think like he first made it, and the studio was like, no, this is too expensive. When he wrote it, they're like, we're not going to do this. And then 15 years later, they were like, we should have done this.
Yeah, no kidding.
So after they kind of did their stuff with Aliens versus Predator, they came out and they returned to his early version, and I think he might have produced it.
I think he produced. I think he directed it.
No, he. I don't think he directed it.
He did not direct it. He did produce it.
They thought he would maybe direct it, but he didn't end up directing it. But he produced it. But it was based on his script,
which is probably a good thing.
It was a huge box office hit, I think.
It did well. Yeah. It did better than a lot of those movies do.
Yeah. In 2010, he released Machete, starring Danny Trejo. Yeah, which was based on a fake trailer for the movie Grindhouse, which was part of the double feature that he did with Tarantino. And him and Trejo go back to Desperado, and he, for a long time, wanted to make a movie based on the Machete character. And I think even Machete made an appearance in Spy Kids. But I remember him telling a story about trying to cast someone for Trejo's role. And when Trejo came in, he just took one look at Trejo and gave him the knives and said, "Here, you got the role. Just take these knives and start learning them."
Have you ever heard him talk about his career and where he came from? Because
Trejo?
Yeah.
No.
He's fascinating because he came straight out of jail and he was a hardcore criminal. Wow. And he came out and got into this acting, playing like bit roles and like, background guys because he's pretty well typecast. And he ended up building a career out of that by following through with Rodriguez, who helped him through all this. And he's actually legit good at what he does.
Yeah. I guess when that movie was coming out, there was some kind of controversial immigration legislation getting pushed through in Arizona. And so they recut a new trailer, a fake trailer for Machete that made it look like the movie was about the legislation and like that Machete was going to lead a revolt against the legislation or something like that. But it was just a spoof, and Rodriguez was like, well, it was Cinco de Mayo, and I had a couple tequilas, and I decided to recut a trailer, but it's not what the actual movie's about. I think they made a sequel to Machete, right?
Yeah, I don't know if it's out yet, but it's almost in the process.
Okay. As far as the latest going on with Rodriguez, another thing I noticed, he worked on this film called 100 Years, which was written by John Malkovich. It's a sci-fi film, but it's not going to be released till 2115. So they've made this movie.
Wait, what?
Yeah, they made this movie called 100 Years. It's not going to be released for 100 years. It's coming out in 2115. I don't know if they have like some previews for it, but like you can't see the movie, and they made like metal tickets for it, which can be like willed down to people's heirs. So like Rodriguez got some and other people got some, but this movie's not going to come out for 100 years. And I think Pharrell, the musician, he did some music for it. So it's this movie they filmed, and then it's being stored in some special vault.
Right.
It's pretty interesting. I don't know all the details for it, but I just looked at the basics of it on Wikipedia.
John Malkovich wrote it?
Yeah. It's called 100 Years, and it's not going to come out for 100 years.
That's amazing.
So we'll never see it.
We should do a podcast on that movie.
Yeah, in 100 years.
I give it 4 stars.
You're pre-giving it stars?
I'm giving it 4 stars.
So the thing I take away from Rodriguez is he's an interesting, very likable guy. He's a self-starter, self-motivated. He likes to do his own thing. He friended George Lucas, like I said, at some point. And he talked about George Lucas and said how like, George Lucas wanted to do Flash Gordon, but he couldn't get the rights to it. So instead, he just made Star Wars. Rodriguez has essentially done the same because he's got a bunch of franchises. He's got the Machete franchise. He's done Sin City. He's got the Dusk Till Dawn franchise. He's got Spy Kids. He's done his own thing, and it's really worked out for him. And was started off as like a do-it-yourself kind of guy, and he's kind of kept up with it and stayed outside of the studio system for the most part, occasionally flirting with it for a couple projects.
Well, really just to move his own ends, though.
Yeah.
It's pretty amazing. The thing that I find fascinating is that he is looked at as this guy who does these independent films and he does them on such a cheap budget. But when we look at Sin City and how he used green screen and all the, the filming in color and then changing it to black and white and all the effects that went into that movie, he doesn't lose any of that character or that go-get-'em attitude that he put into all of his other films, even using all of those special effects and all those techniques. He's still, to me, when I think of Robert Rodriguez, it's not necessarily that go-get-'em attitude or that I'm going to pull myself up by my bootstraps. It's more that he knows exactly what he wants to do and will do whatever it takes to get that done. If that's with a $7,000 budget, he's going to make the movie he wants to make with $7,000.
Yeah.
If he wants to make Sin City to be a really truthful to that graphic novel, he's going to do whatever it takes to make it absolutely true to that graphic novel. And I think that's that kind of attitude that makes him so successful.
Yeah. I feel like Rodriguez is an innovator, and so is Miller was an innovator. Mm-hmm. And I think they bonded over that. So let's get into the movie. I don't know if you guys have anything else to say about Rodriguez. So, Sin City the movie, Rodriguez initially made a short film based on the story The Customer's Always Right to entice Miller to let him do the full length based on comic panels as storyboards for the movie. So Miller, as we know, went to Hollywood at some point. He wrote a rap song for the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Ninja rap.
And then he did the RoboCop sequels, and he just had a bad experience. He hated it. So Miller was not keen on doing anything else with Hollywood. However, Rodriguez, he decided he was going to do this. He filmed this like short little part of Sin City and invited Miller to come out there and check it out. And he was innovative in that he was going to use a green screen and do it digitally with high-def cameras. He ended up convincing Miller, and he was like, we should just direct this together. And I'm going to I think the way he put it is, look, I like your comic. I want to do a translation of it, not an adaptation. We can use your comic book panels to do the storyboards. I'll do a script real quick. It's basically going to be your comic book. And like within a month, he turned one around and he got Miller interested.
So, and this might be getting a little too deep too early, but my question is this. Did Rodriguez want to make a Sin City comic book and entice Miller to allow him to use that property by providing him with this perfect directorial experience that he knew that Miller had been looking for?
Well, I think it was known that Miller had a bad experience with Hollywood and wasn't interested in doing things, but Rodriguez was a longtime fan of the comics.
Yeah.
And he really wanted to make it. I guess he knew intuitively that he had to go the extra mile to entice. Yeah. Right. So he ended up doing this proof of concept video, and it was like, I think, we talked about in the last episode how Miller talked about describing being a scriptwriter as like a fire hydrant getting peed on by dogs. Right. So you got Rodriguez coming to him and saying, no, your opinion matters. I'm going to involve you. In fact, why don't you co-direct this with me?
Yeah, but how much actual direction do you think Miller did?
Miller was there for the entire thing, I think.
Yeah, he was there for sure.
Miller said he loved working with actors and giving them direction. And I think you hear Rodriguez talk, he said comic books is a very visual medium. And he kind of was like, how to frame things, how to do things. Of course, Rodriguez had more technical knowledge than Miller.
Right.
But he was just like, you're drawing these things as they should be filmed. So like what you're doing.
I just wonder how much of that is Rodriguez just feeding into what Miller wanted to hear and setting up the experience for him.
Maybe. But I mean, we know that Miller was there the whole time. It's not like they had a falling out afterward.
Right.
Like he just it wasn't like a switcheroo, like a bait and switch. It wasn't. Yeah.
Right. And Rodriguez seems like a pretty genuine dude who's not really trying to pull anything over.
Yeah.
Wilk, what do you...
I bet you Rodriguez benefited from that. I mean, like, he had the creator there, he could talk to him.
Oh, yeah. Get to know the motivations of these characters.
And
some directors value that, some don't.
I'd say, and again, Frank Miller probably benefited. I mean, they probably had a mutual beneficial relationship, but I'd be surprised if anyone but Rodriguez controlled the direction. I mean, I think Miller was there to assist and advise, and he got a director's credit, but I doubt he was doing a whole lot of directing,
That's interesting because it became a point of contention with the Directors Guild. I don't know if you saw any of the research.
No.
So Rodriguez has had a on and off again relationship with the Directors Guild of America. And this film was one of the problems because he wanted to credit himself and Miller as co-directors. But the guild pushed back and said, unless you're a bona fide partnership, you can't do that. And I think the reason they have these kind of rules that don't always seem to make sense is because they don't want producers to come in and just claim a director credit without actually doing the work. And so, he pointed out the Wachowski brothers to them, and they're like, well, they're already a director partnership. And
they're sisters, so.
They're already established.
What?
He couldn't end up...
Well, they are.
He couldn't credit the movie as him and Miller co-directing the movie.
They had penises.
And so he told the directors... the Directors Guild pushed back. And the Directors Guild ended up
Am I wrong?
In talking about it, the Directors Guild was like, hey, we don't care if you both direct it. We just can't credit you both. And I guess Rodriguez went back to Miller and said, here's the dilemma. We can both direct it, but they only want one of us to be the director. And then Miller told him, well, that doesn't sound fair. And so Rodriguez is like, you're right. What should I do? But he ended up leaving the Directors Guild just so he can do a co-credit directing credit. Also, they brought in Quentin Tarantino to do some directing, and they named him as special guest director, which I guess is not even a legit credit with the Directors Guild.
Just making shit up.
But Rodriguez has had this on and off again relationship with the Directors Guild. Like, he'll be part of the, like, basically he gets real successful. The Director Guild is like, hey, we're embarrassed that you're successful and you're not part of the guild. Yeah. So we need you to join the guild. Then he joins the guild. And then when he wants to do something, they're like, you can't do that.
He's like, okay, I'm out again.
And then he gets out.
Right.
So he's fine with that. He understands why they have the rules, to protect directors or whatever, but
I can relate.
Yeah. He doesn't like having a boss. He likes doing his own thing. Like we said, he was a serious fan of the comic. He based it on the comic book panels to storyboard it. He brings Miller on to co-direct. What else can I say about the filming? The film was a huge success. It was one of the first to go all green screen. They used some real object. They used high-definition video. They shot it in color and then color-corrected it digitally and treated for height contrast to get that noir effect they wanted. Rodriguez is often known for doing multiple roles in his film, which reminds me of Soderbergh, who we covered on a Solaris episode earlier in the season. So, like, for instance, Rodriguez did some of the music on this film, which I think he did in Desperado as well.
Mm-hmm.
But this film is, like we said, done in an anthology style with different yarns, as Frank Miller would call them, different storylines. And Rodriguez did one, John Debney did one, and Graham Revelli did one. And they also collaborated on some. And they had some other outside music, one by a London-based alternative group called The Servant, which they used heavily in the promotion of the film. The film has an ensemble cast, lots of actors. Jessica Alba,
everybody.
Benicio del Toro, Brittany Murphy, Clive Owen, Mickey Rourke, Bruce Willis, Elijah Wood, who was Frodo Baggins, Michael Clark Duncan, Rosario Dawson, Rutger Hauer, Michael Madison. This is like tons of people in this movie. It goes on to be a huge success with the critics and with the public. It's recognized. I think it gets awards, got awards for its technical accomplishments. It ends up being a very stylized film, just like the comic.
Mm-hmm.
In the end, it made $58 million over a negative cost of $40 million. The plot of it is based on The Customer Is Always Right, The Yellow Bastard, The Hard Goodbye, The Big Fat Kill, and they kind of break up the Yellow Bastard story. So it's based on those books of the comic series. You guys, I know, Wilk, you saw the film first. I saw the film first, and now we read the book later and we rewatched the film. Rob, you had a different experience.
Mm-hmm.
Wilk, let me ask you, did you feel like it held up seeing it years later? Did you watch the extended version? It's only I feel like a couple minutes extended, but
I watched it on iTunes, and I think I bought it for like $8, and I watched it. I don't know if it was extended or not, though.
I got the extended version on Amazon, but I think the non-extended version was on Netflix. That's probably what I saw.
I saw the non-extended.
Okay. I don't know how much it's changed. I know it's recut and extended, but it looked like it was only like 4 minutes longer. But Wilk, like you said, you rewatched it and you enjoyed it.
Yeah, again, it was very... I mean, it's preserved. I mean, it's not gonna... It's time-stamped. It's gonna look the same in 100 years. Much like the movie 100 Years, as it did when I first saw it. It's not going to be dated by anything. They're not sitting next to a gas pump with a gas price. They're not like MCI long distance service or things like that. It's kind of in a time capsule already. So no, and it still held up. It was nice seeing Brittany Murphy actually.
Yeah, since died.
She died a while ago, didn't she? I mean,
yeah.
And then Clive Owen was very hot back when that movie came out. And it's funny because Josh Brolin is kind of hot right now, or was hot. You know, his career's kind of heated up a little bit too. But like
Josh Brolin ended up replacing him in the sequel.
Yeah, but I'm saying Clive Owen was he was like the it boy.
He was in Children of Men, which we covered on this podcast.
Yeah, we did. No, it was all in the same time period. He was in a whole bunch of movies, and they wanted to make him the next James Bond. And really now Clive Owen's just some guy named Clive in England. So
right.
I mean, he's whatever.
He does a good job.
Which is ironic because Clive Owen. Brolin's been in comic book movies galore.
Yeah.
Dude was Cable. He was...
Brolin, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanos.
Jonah Hex.
He's like the comic book guy.
Yeah, since then.
So
this is 2005.
Yeah.
I mean, so...
Well, he was in the second one, so it was 14.
Oh, yeah, right. This 2014, yeah.
No, I mean, I really enjoyed the way the first one kind of weaves the stories, and I love the Yellow Bastard story. I love the Old Town story. I mean, they're really just
I mean, I sent you guys an article by Dan Seitz for Uprocks that kind of argued that this movie is more style over substance, and it sort of hamstrings the actors but because the director was so insistent on recreating comic panels for a different medium. I mean, did you feel that way watching it?
I feel that's a totally biased opinion against comic books because the characterization was there in the first place. I think the depth, the coloring, the way that the movie was shot is all brilliant and tells a great story with significant depth. I think the use of color in only interacting with specific outcomes from action that has happened with the main characters is amazing. Certainly it is hyper stylized. I mean, you can't really argue against that, but at the same time, it's
just like the comic.
Well, the style is the fucking substance.
That's the
guys.
point.
I mean, come on. It's like John Woo. That's the guy who puts style over substance as a director. There's a scene of doves in every movie. I mean, like there's a lot of examples of style over substance in filmmaking, but
McG.
Yeah, this is the substance here and the style. Are really the same thing. And that's why the aesthetic of the film and having Frank Miller there, I think, lends it a certain credibility because it does capture the tone of the graphic novels.
It's based on the art. That's the whole point.
Yeah, which I frankly enjoy.
Well, I think this article was basically like, you're forcing the actors to just stick with this comic just to stick with it, as opposed to, trying to adapt it to the new medium.
But that's so short-sighted because the actors have to act as in those by adding those restrictions to the actors, you're looking at them, they have to act within a certain constraint, which is frankly showcasing their acting ability by being able to work within those restrictions. Mm-hmm. And I guess you certainly you're not letting, Tom Cruise couldn't have done it because he can't be Tom Cruise in this movie. Mm-hmm. Where Tom Cruise acts like Tom Cruise he plays Tom Cruise in every movie he acts in. Where Bruce Willis has to fit into that character. Brittany Murphy has to fit into that character through their acting.
So you feel like years later watching this, because Rob, you read the comics first, but I'm guessing you saw the movie before last week.
Yeah.
So this is your second viewing of it. So you thought it held up.
Yes, absolutely.
And I'd agree. I also felt like it held up. Like I enjoyed it. I enjoyed rewatching it. I think it does do a great job of capturing the spirit of the comics. It was interesting to read
that's funny.
Read the comics and then watch it, and you're like, wow, this is really like a literal translation of the comic. Yeah,
and I think we see that again with 300.
Yeah, they chose to go that route with 300 as well. Mm-hmm. But now, I don't think the comics have necessarily kept following that. Comic movies.
Oh, no. God, no. This is unique amongst comic movies. Very few comic movies try and capture the spirit. Dick Tracy in the early 90s.
They did a pretty good job.
Yeah, they tried to capture that.
Watchmen obviously borderline shot for shot, what you guys did on a previous podcast.
Love the Watchmen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you get away with that with some of the comic book movies that you see. And I think although I'm a sucker for those movies, you lose some of that. And I think that's where you actually lose some of the art from the comic book, which is really the important aspect of the medium.
You make a good point. I just want to segue on that. I think if you look at the Marvel movies and their success, Marvel is kind of predicating the future of the franchise not so much on the artwork, but on the writing. And they want to tell the stories. Mm-hmm. And if you look at a Frank Miller thing, even though he's the writer, he writes to the art, and the art writes to him. The artwork to me is like, it's a very big component of the actual story. So the visual art of the comic book needs to be conveyed in a Frank Miller thing. 300, if you cast, I don't know, who's the guy from Gladiator, Australian,
Russell Crowe
to play the part, and you did a straight literal version of 300.
Yeah, it's not.
It wouldn't be 300. Yeah, right. 300 is over the top and cheesy, but it's
about the art.
Yeah, it really is. One of my early.
I think they used also Lynn Varley, who was involved with the comic. They also used her
for the coloring
coloring for the movie.
Mm-hmm. And it's intense. You see that. The coloring is pretty important. The
I
stuff
remember
that comes
liking
out
that
in color.
movie.
300.
Yeah, I remember liking that.
It's the same thing.
I never read the comic though.
I'm trying to remember if I read the comic or not. I feel like I read it.
A great example of where this has failed and succeeded, and this actually is a great example and ties into Frank Miller, is if you look at Sean McFarlane's Spawn.
Right.
HBO had an amazing animated series of Spawn. Yeah. The art drew me in. I fucking loved it. And then they made this shitty Mario Brothers version of Spawn that was it was like something.
They're making another Spawn movie now.
Is it going to be good?
No.
God damn it. That HBO series, I fucking love that shit. It was great. It was HBO.
Jamie Foxx, I think, is going to play Spawn.
You liked the HBO version, but there was another version?
The HBO version was an animated series.
Yeah.
And then they made a movie out of it.
With John Leguizamo.
Yeah,
John Leguizamo, he did a good job as the clown character, right?
And then he was the only, and everything else was terrible.
I remember like the clown character being like, "That's John Leguizamo."
Yeah,
he was terrified. But I'm saying the aesthetic of the movie, the art, the direction,
just lost.
It looked like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Yes.
And maybe it was
Very
trying for that,
plasticky.
but and maybe I was just spoiled because I did read the comic and I saw the animated series, and like to me, it was immersive, like the artwork and the feeling, and they lost it all.
One really ironic thing is that if you look at the Marvel Cinematic Universe. It's actually, they're moving their comics to fit more with the cinematic universe, which is the exact opposite of this, where they're trying to recreate the art, where now it's going the opposite direction because it's more marketable to have the comic books based on the cinematic versions of the universes, which is doubly ironic because if you look at Dark Horse Comics, they pick up properties such as Terminator, Aliens, Predator, RoboCop, and they turn those into comic books the same way that Marvel's doing with its Marvel Universe now, basing that on their cinematic universe, which is Dark Horse is where Sin City came from.
God, yeah. I mean, that is kind of crazy, though, when you think about it.
It shows us where we're moving to.
My hardcore Marvel fans, I don't count you as these, they know everything about the character. It's like, it's a soap opera to them. And that's fine, it works, but like, I've always been an emoter. I like comics that make me feel something. I like the artwork. I mean, like when I think of Batman, I think of like great pictures and the overall Batman story. Mm-hmm. And really, and I like horror comics. I mean, I like the old 1960s Tales from the Crypt shit. Those are some of my favorite books that I have, and I usually buy one-off graphic novels. You introduced me to a great series. What the fuck was it called? The Alien series.
Aliens?
No.
Alien Genocide?
You like it too, Ryan. It's like, starts with an S. God damn it.
Not Aliens versus Predators.
No, it takes place on a different planet. Saga, yes.
Oh, Saga?
Love the Saga series.
Oh, well, that's the current transcendent comic book. It's amazing.
I've only recently started reading those.
I've read like the first year or two of it, and Rob told me about it. I picked it up on a lark, and like really,
I got bored on that early, and it's paid off. I mean, it's
the artwork
amazing.
But the artwork and the way the characters are designed and the writing, it all kind of blends together seamlessly. That's a great comic to me.
Yeah, I've been reading those recently. I've been posting on Instagram.
So Brian K. Vaughan is the writer, and he's recently.
But there's a woman involved.
Yeah, Fiona Staples.
Yeah,
she's the artist.
She's the artist,
and she's phenomenal. Also, transcendent. I mean, her art is amazing. It's so simple and yet so emotional. It's incredible. Brian K. Vaughan. I want to say he just signed with DC, but I'm not 100%. And I'll screw that up if I say it. I want to say he's writing Superman, but I could be just sounding like an asshole saying that.
DC has always had better art, better visuals, I feel, than the Marvel.
Isn't Saga independent?
Yeah, Saga's through Image, which is independent.
Okay.
But DC's doing a better job of trying to sign some of these big independent artists. And Brian K. Vaughan's done some other stuff for Marvel and DC, I think. Off the top of my head, I can't name it, but he's done some pretty seminal books. We're taking a hard left here. Talking about. I went off in a comic book tangent.
Why don't we get into the second movie?
Well, you mentioned Style over Substance. That's what brought us to it. So we're going to go back to the second movie, which was Richard Rodriguez joint.
Yes.
In theory.
Yeah.
What was Rodriguez and Miller again?
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, Miller is pretty rough around the collar. And again,
he's coming off of his difficult time period. So it comes out in 2014. It's called Sin City, A Dame to Kill For. It is another huge ensemble cast. It's got Mickey Rourke, Jessica Alba, Rosario Dawson coming back, Jamie King. You got Powers Booth, Bruce Willis comes back. Then you got some newcomers. Josh Brolin is, I guess, replacing Clive Owen. You still don't know why. Joseph Gordon-Levitt, Eva Green, Dennis Haybert. That's replacing Clark Duncan, who died. You got Ray Liotta, Christopher Lloyd makes an appearance. Jamie Chung,
I forgot
who's also a replacement. Jerry Piven, and there's others. Even Lady Gaga makes an appearance.
Yep. Who is she?
She's the waitress.
Oh, okay.
It's based on Another Saturday Night. The Long Bad Night, A Dame to Kill For, and then Nancy's Last Dance. And the script was written by Miller. It's primarily based on the second book, and then some of these short stories that were in Booze, Broads, and Bullets.
Nancy's Last Dance. That's the back half of Yellow Bastard where she gets the revenge that we had talked about in the last podcast.
Okay. Miller wrote the screenplay in 2006. So that's like the year after the first one comes out. But he complained at a Comic-Con that the following year that the Weinstein brothers were delaying things. In 2011, they announced that William Monahan is brought on to add finishing touches to the screenplay and that they plan to release the film in 3D. Rodriguez later says that they always intended a 2014 release and were holding an earlier release date for Machete Kills.
Yeah.
There was some controversy with the original poster, which was banned in the USA for nudity that you could see for Eva Green wearing a sheer gown. And like I said, there was some recasting due to actors' deaths and a pregnancy. It comes out and it doesn't do so hot. Let's see, it grossed 13.8 in North America, 25.6 million in other countries, for a total of 39.4 against a production budget of 65 million. So, I mean, there's more numbers, but the bottom line is the first one was like such a phenomenal success that I think they were hoping the second one would be, but it comes out 9 years later and it's not.
I think that's style, but I mean, when you look at 9 years later, there were so many movies that came out in the meantime that just pushed that style beyond. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff. A Scanner Darkly, just a whole bunch of movies that push that, where you have that, where they shoot it and then they make the technical adjustments to the film afterwards that make such a huge difference. It just wasn't quite, it didn't have that same bite to it that it did originally. And then on top of that, I think that the buzz on Sin City had faded a little bit because it had been a while. Frank Miller had turned out some stuff that wasn't, his name didn't carry as much weight.
Yeah, and then he went the extra mile to say some controversial stuff that didn't go over well.
But regardless, I mean, I think when Sin City came out, it was new, it was fresh, and
right.
And again,
a couple of the stories are based on new stories that aren't a part of the original Sin City.
Yeah.
Well, I think the Joseph Gordon-Levitt part is new stuff, right?
Two of them were.
I don't remember it from the books, but it might have snuck in there.
But think like this though,
and I liked those parts.
Yeah, they were good.
No, it wasn't.
He did a great job.
It wasn't.
Yeah, he did.
It wasn't that film, but this is a defense of it as art. I mean, when Sin City came out, I mean, it was high art. It was something new. It was original. It was fresh. It was provocative, and part of it was the style being the substance. But it wasn't so much storytelling. It was the overall package.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
and you lose some of that in 9 years later because it's
I mean,
not new.
Jackson Pollock, if he gave you two very similar pictures 8 years apart or 9 years apart, you're not going to be as impressed by the one that's very similar to the one that came out 9 years. It's
especially considering all the other advancements that were made in between.
Right.
But they tried to make this one 3D. You got
3D is never that easy. Filmmakers hate 3D, dude.
Everybody hates 3D.
You also got Rodriguez told Miller, hey, why don't you come up with some new stories for this film that were unique to this film, which he did. So they tried to give some more new content.
Everything about Rodriguez, though, he's super inclusive. I mean, he's the kind of guy, he's not cutthroat. He wants to bring everybody into the table. He is so secure in his ability as a filmmaker. He's not going to be threatened by a co-director. I mean, he got to co-direct with Tarantino on Dust to Dawn as well too, and it wasn't that was the first dispute. But I think he probably likes Frank Miller. Probably appreciates his insight. Yeah. Frank Miller, he's an artist. So is Rodriguez. I mean, they're creative guys. But I mean, I don't think Frank Miller's bringing anything to the table with Rodriguez here.
That's the thing is
when Frank Miller did his own thing with The Spirit, it flopped.
Right, and it was artistically similar. I mean, it was that same kind of noir, the same black and white with pieces of color here and there.
Mm-hmm. What would you say that 300 was similar?
Yeah, yes, 300 was similar too,
and that was a success.
Yeah,
but the directors are key here, though. Zack Snyder knows how to make a comic,
right? And
Zack Snyder made 300, but Miller did The Spirit on his own,
right?
Yeah,
but and 300 was successful, and The Spirit was a flop.
Right.
You never saw The Spirit, did you?
Yeah, it was bad.
Okay. So what made it bad? Just out of curiosity.
I haven't seen it.
It was just
acting or story or
you'd have to see it. It's just like a hot mess. I mean, it's just not put together well. And I think that speaks to Rodriguez really more than anything else, being cohesive and able to put together a very quality film. But the other thing is that Miller,
it was a labor of love for Miller because he loved those comics.
Yes. But I don't know if that necessarily translates. I don't know if Sin City would have been good if it had just been Miller either. as
Probably
far
not.
as a movie goes. And
You would think not, based on what we know.
Right. And then even more so based on the second movie, where Millard's not really, he's not going to bring, like, he could write a brand new story and it's not going to matter because it's the collection of art that really makes it and makes it stand up. And once you have that in the first movie, it doesn't matter what Miller brings to the second movie because it's just more of the same. He's not going to, even if it's a new storyline, that's not really Miller's skills, and his genius it's in the whole world and painting that entire world and building those characters through this complex interwoven connection, and just adding little pieces of that isn't really going to change it or make it a whole lot better because it's not anything different. He's not bringing anything innovative the second time around. It's just still more of the same Frank Miller.
I agree.
I remember when I started watching the second movie, and
Also, Jessica Alba was terrible in the second movie.
really, I don't know. I remember Frank Miller telling the story how he ran into her at the set on the second movie, and he was like going up to her and saying hi, and she was really cold, and he's like, oh, because she was like really in character. She was like trying to take the role.
You guys ever hear of the concept of like simple tea or the simple products or things like that?
No.
Mm-hmm.
Target. Jessica Alba made over $100 million by branding the simple products that you now see in the grocery. I mean, so that's what she's been doing since 2005. I don't think she's part of that whole...
The motivation's not there.
Well, I don't think she's ever that great of an actress. I think she was
No.
good.
She's very good looking.
Very good looking. She's good at portraying youth, exuberance. But Jessica Alba in her 30s is not Jessica Alba in her 20s.
Yeah,
and
right. I totally agree with you. And I'd sound sexist and shitty, but it's
no,
true.
there's plenty of actors that fall in that category too. But like on a different Jessica Biel is now doing some pretty amazing acting in the show The Sinner, if you've seen that. But Alba, she hasn't. I mean, like she's basically playing the same role with no growth that she
9
played
years
9
ago.
Other
years
comic
ago.
book characters?
She played
Dark Angel.
She got her start as Dark Angel. There's somebody else too.
She was in Idle Hands, but she always
she was
played
Honey.
She always played the HPA in her early career,
Yeah.
the hot piece of ass, and just like Scarlett Johansson did. Scarlett Johansson's proven to be quite an adept actor.
Right. Sometimes she's terrible.
Sometimes she is terrible, but she's done some interesting roles,
Yeah.
and she can do comedy. Alba really hasn't done much more than being...
There's just not the depth.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever seen anything complex or difficult, and really... that did actually, I think about, I'm just doing this for the first time now, it did fall flat when it's like a decade later and she's basically playing the same character just 10 years older and I don't know, man. It just didn't really fly for me. It wasn't doing it.
And I think Bruce Willis did really well in both. I love Bruce Willis. I don't mean to bring him into this conversation to talk negatively about him, but at the same time, he felt like he was playing the same character, but you could really see the age on him. And you could feel the age on him, and it just didn't. And he kind of lost a step on that. And I'm not saying his acting ability, but his ability to be that character.
Yeah, I felt less compelled by him in the second movie.
Mm-hmm. But then again, as you were talking about Levitt, I think he was phenomenal.
Yeah,
and he really brought an energy to the movie that was missing in all the other scenes. And I think that the contrast between what he was doing and what the other characters was doing, because I think they weren't so fresh, you could really see the difference.
I mean, when I was watching this, my initial thought was, wow, this is just like the comic. And my initial thought, I think I texted my cousin, I was like, I don't see why people have a problem with this. Like, it was like, I'm like, wow, this is beat for beat like the comic. It seems to be capturing what the first one did. But then I looked at some of the reviews, and maybe I shouldn't have at the time. And I saw that, like, they're like, it kind of just it's almost like it got monotonous after a while. Like, the violence and the action sequences just kind of kept going, and you didn't feel it as much as you felt it in the first one.
Right.
And then after watching the second one,
same way.
I kind of agreed.
Some sequels are just a money grab. I mean, most of them are. It's like Jaws was a brilliant
the money
movie.
grab would have been to do this right away.
Well,
right.
Regardless, though, I'm just saying, but Jaws 2 doesn't feel like Jaws because it's Jaws fucking 2 and it's already been done. I mean, The Exorcist had a sequel. I think it had 2 sequels. I've never seen them.
And then a remake and a sequel to the remake, I think.
They intended this to be a trilogy. I mean, they wanted to make a third one. There's quotes from Miller saying, hey, you better go out and see this one because we want to make a third one.
Yeah, but
they didn't make it because this one didn't do well.
But that's probably okay. Because I think they really, with the first one, they really got done what they needed to get done. And then after that, I don't see how they put together a third Sin City movie. Yeah. There's still story to tell, certainly, but it's just the innovation and the art has already been seen. And by putting out a third movie, because it's such a visual medium, the story is not compelling enough and not different enough to really move it.
But here's my question. Like, I gave the book 5 stars. Are we saying that there is a problem with the underlying story?
No, I'm just saying that you could put the movies together and you have a 3-hour movie or a 4-hour movie, but like this sequel didn't need to be made. It's not it's just like, it's not timely.
Killing a dead horse.
Yeah, I mean, like, the movie was already made once. You're just adding 2 hours of found footage 9 years later.
Yeah.
That's all that it really is.
But Frank had more stories.
Yeah, but
like A Dame to Kill For was not explored in the first movie.
Right.
So, could this have been done better, differently?
I don't know if it could. I think they did an excellent job doing this movie. I just don't think it's going to have the same punch as the first because
So does that make A Dame to Kill For a lesser storyline? Because I felt like it was an interesting storyline.
Yeah, on face value it is, but
when I read it, it's a story of Eva, right? Or Eva.
Yeah.
Let me give you an example of a good sequel in terms of storyline. The Road Warrior with Mad Max and Mel Gibson, where he's basically trapped and he's defending an entire town like an old Western. That's the second one. You jump to the third one where he goes to Thunderdome and it's a whole different society, but it's an evolution of the characters and the world he lives in. Mm-hmm. This had none of that. I mean, like, you can make a good sequel to a movie, and the Mad Max series is one of my favorites because every movie is a deserving sequel, even the reimagination of the one that came out, which is fucking fantastic a few years ago.
Fury Road?
Yeah, Fury Road, which is just, as far as a filmmaking thing goes, is one of my favorite films
it was very popular.
ever made. Well, it's all practical effects. But I'm saying,
it was great.
Here, it's literally the same movie. I mean, there's nothing new.
It's right in the title. It's Sin City for a reason, because the whole first movie and the graphic novels, it all's weaving that tapestry that was so rich, and that's what Miller did really well, is weaving that whole tapestry together, but you already get the entire tapestry painted for you in the first movie, so anything else is just going to be, it's like putting a little more whipped cream on your sundae. You already have that whole tapestry woven for you in the first movie, and so there's no real way to change it from there. It's almost deep in the first movie to a detriment to anything else you're trying to add on top. Because it's so put together and every piece interacts together that putting more stuff on top of it, even if it's stuff that you haven't seen before, is not really going to build that world or the characters. And so the only shining spot is that new character. But because you have such a complete picture, there's nothing really you can put on top of it that's going to increase that picture.
Well, I mean, they added the new character.
Yeah, which was awesome. And that was the highlight.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, if you made a sequel to Pulp Fiction, I mean, you know...
So are you saying like a Pulp Fiction sequel would be a bad idea?
Yes.
Yeah.
You know, they actually made a sequel to Easy Rider.
Which is terrible.
I mean, the Easy Rider ends, spoiler alert, with the two main characters dying. And they made a sequel to Easy Rider. Chinatown got a sequel, I believe.
Yeah, and it was a
hot mess.
I haven't seen it, but it was a hot mess, but it was not as bad as you would think it would be.
But it was like 14 years later. I'm just saying, when you add these sequels like so far down the line.
But I mean, it's not like...
Yeah,
I mean,
something like that, yeah.
But
the
like,
two Jakes?
But we're saying here...
Yes, two Jakes, I think.
We're saying here that the new stuff they added was good, and the old stuff that was already part of the original narrative that they were going off of was not...
It's watchable. It's watchable. I enjoy watching it, but in the same sense that, like...
It's just like there's nothing new.
Well, it's like watching a reunion show of your favorite sitcom. I mean, it's like you feel a little bit dirty. It's like the new Star Wars movies, where they kind of basically just redo Star Wars with some new elements, bring the cast back. And
it's cool, but and that's the thing, is that because it's such a rich environment, when you try to... I mean, and you add in the new characters and it's great, but it's not. There's nothing there that's really going to be able to support a whole new movie.
Yeah, it wasn't a soap opera. It was like a one-off movie that you could walk in and walk out of. I mean, you weren't like longing to hear what happens next. It wasn't like a cliffhanger ending.
Right.
You're like, oh my god, what's going to happen in the next movie? It's like,
A Dame to Kill For is not what's happened next. It's just another story within that universe.
Within the same time.
But did you enjoy reading A Dame to Kill For?
I enjoyed the movie and reading it. I'm just defending the lack of reception for it. I mean, that makes sense to me.
But did you enjoy reading the graphic novel more than watching the second movie?
Yes, and that may be a piece of it because yes, and really I enjoyed watching the movie,
which is interesting because the movie is not different than the novel, the graphic novel.
But there's just because the content is so repetitive. Person A gets angry, they go to see, so A happens, it causes them to feel this way, they respond this way, and fill in sex or violence. So it's like a repetitive formula. So the real value is in the depth of the character, the depth of the city, and all that. And once you get to that part, then it's just those same people running through that same situation over and over again.
But did you feel that way when you were reading?
Kind of.
Less so.
Less so.
Why did you feel more in the movie?
That's
format?
a great... Well, I think the fact that it's condensed into a 2-hour film as opposed to these graphic novels where the story runs longer. It's a slower burn in the comic.
Wilk, did you feel like did you feel less strongly when you were reading? Like, did you feel like the same thing I said to Rob? Did you feel like when you read the second book, Dame to Kill For, that you didn't feel like the problems that you felt when you watched the movie?
No, I mean, I'm not saying I even had a problem with the movie per se. I'm just saying that it's, again, lightning in the bottle versus like a rehash, a money grab. It's
so, but if you're saying that the second movie is, if you're saying it's like, when you say lightning in a bottle, that makes me feel like you're taking away from the first movie. Like it was more like that article said, it's more substance over or style over substance.
No, I'm saying the opposite. I'm saying it's a unique piece of art, but you lose. I mean, like if you're
it lose some of that nobility.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it takes away to like just kind of.
But when you rewatched it, you didn't feel it lost the novelty. It's only when you saw the sequel you felt it lost the novelness.
When I rewatched it, I'm like, yeah, I remember watching this and it was great. It was mind blowing. It was fantastic. I mean, like,
did you not feel that when you watched it?
I mean, what do you
the second time?
What do you remember more fondly, your first blowjob or your second one?
No, well, that's serious. Not even fair, dude. Because every blowjob is special in its own way.
Your first kiss or your second kiss. I mean, it's the whole thing. It's like it was the uniqueness of the first movie that made it provocative, that made it like memorable, that made it great.
But you know what I'm saying? Like I'm comparing like a second viewing of the first movie versus a first viewing of the second movie. Which is what I experienced because I saw the first movie already, but I did not see the second movie. So same thing for you, Wilk. You didn't see the second movie.
No, the second movie was good. It wasn't great. I'm not saying it was a bad movie. I'm just saying I understand.
When you saw the first movie, you thought it was great, and when you saw it again, you're like, yeah, I can see why it was great.
So if I had to choose between the two now, if I could watch either the second movie again or the first movie for a third or fifth or whatever time, I would rather watch the first movie again than the second movie. Mm-hmm. So I'm not sure what that says, but I think that there was something about the first movie where they build that world. And there was a long time between viewings, too, that I think has a big piece in there. But there's something about the second movie that it really felt like they were pushing the same material more and expanding it, and rightly so. But I feel like the feeling that world building occur in the first movie is really where the value is. It's in the entirety of that piece that's put together that's so fleshed out, that's so whole and complete. And anything else you plug into that story it's still valuable, but it doesn't have the same value because that world has already been created.
All right, well, why don't we go to our final comments?
I thought this was a better movie. The whole Old Town sequence is great in the first one.
Well, out of 5 stars, how many would you give each movie? And any final comments you got?
I would give the original Sin City a 5-star movie in every sense of the word. It's one that I would insist that my kids watch when they're old enough to watch it, and I would show it to an alien.
Like 30?
Or next week.
Probably next week. I'm not a good parent. I mean, I'm not a great parent. I'm a good parent. That's the difference.
Kind of like the sequel.
Strive for goodness.
Well, the sequel, again, I mean, it's not a bad thing. It's not necessary. It just extends the movie. Like if Laura was here, she goes on and on about movies that are too long. She hates movies that are over a certain length. And there is some validity to that whole thing. Like if the original Sin City was 5 hours long, we probably wouldn't be here talking about it because it would never get released. I mean, like, to me, it's just an extrapolation of the first movie. It's an addendum. I mean, it's good, it's watchable, but I'd give the second one 3.5 stars. So
okay, Rob, what about you?
I think the first movie is a 5-star movie. I think it does an excellent job. The depth, the character, the coloring, how they shot it, I think is fantastic. The translation is perfect. I think it's a 5-star movie for sure. The second movie, I'm going to give 3 stars. I think that the time gap did not do it justice, and I think that it really loses some bite, and I think a lot of the performances fell off in the second.
And I'll say 5 stars for the first movie. Recommend it. You got to see it. It's innovative for the time, and I felt it held up. Second movie, I agree with Wilk. It's a decent enough movie, so I gave it 3.5 stars. But it doesn't wow you like the first one. And I don't think it takes away from the first one. In a repeat viewing of the first one doesn't take away from it. It's still worth seeing. And this whole experiment is very interesting because it is so closely tied to the source material. And you don't often see that. And I tend to like, and I think it's more popular on this podcast, when directors just say, fuck the source material, and they go and do their own thing.
Right.
This is the opposite of that. But you have the first version being hailed as like a great decision.
Well, maybe they picked better source material with the first one too, because I'm telling you, like some of the casting choices and sequences and just the sexuality in the first one was so. Eva Green versus who is the woman that was like the femme fatale, the naked lady in the first one? Italian actress. She's beautiful. It was like I was shocked when I saw her breasts, but she's absolutely gorgeous. I mean, you know what I'm talking about. She was in Spy Kids too. She's wonderful.
I know what you're talking about, but
like, I mean, and again, I can't get over like the way the darkness in that movie, the old title sequence of all those beautiful, amazing women playing prostitutes and the violence that they exude, and I don't know. I mean, like to me, it's just a better movie. In this, and it resonates in my mind better, but like the sequences of stories, I think are superior than the second one.
You know what's funny is you guys, I forget what your scores were for Watchmen.
I think it might have got 5 stars all the way around.
Yeah, so that's the only other graphic novel that you guys have done, right?
Correct.
So it's interesting that those are the ones where the closeness to the source material is a benefit versus the written books, where the movie veers off and it ends up being better off when they veer off.
Yeah. I mean, I always remember Starship Troopers because I like the movie better than the book, which was rare.
Yeah. Well, and again, with the graphic novel, though, it's imprinted in there.
I saw the movie before the book.
Me too.
Like this one.
And my dad was on Starship Troopers, and he absolutely loves that author, which is... Anyways, but but like with the graphic novels, like, they're giving you a visual context, whereas books gives you more imagination, so... I mean, and really, the Watchmen, and they weren't faithful in the Watchmen movie because they drastically changed it.
Yeah.
Drastically.
But generally, it's shot for shot. I mean, the ending was specifically very different, but
the art sequences were, and that to me was just that Zack Snyder appreciated and like taking advantage of that great source material because it's there for you, man. Yeah. It's there. Take it. I mean, if you adapt like black and white words, you have to take creative liberty. You just have to.
Right.
I mean, there's no way around that. I mean, you can't. I mean, but like when you're looking at a drawing, and that's how. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think you're.
It's almost hard not to.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I just think it's. I don't know. I mean, like in Watchmen. I mean, really, it was a fantastic film and a fantastic graphic novel. I mean, the movie had elements that you couldn't. I don't know. You put music into something that just changes everything for me too. So.
Right.
Yeah. The score was great. Both. Yeah. I mean. I mean, honestly, I just think the stories were better in the first one too. When I look back at them, I mean, regardless of how faithful or unfaithful they were, but they chose better stories, probably on purpose for the first one. Mm-hmm. More interesting.
That was their first picks. They could have chose anything, and they chose what they chose.
Right.
All right then. Well, Wilk, do you want to plug anything? You want to plug your website there? Horror?
Major Horror on Facebook.com. That's Laura's website. She's married to me for some reason. And I hope to have a link to some short story anthologies for 2019, but we'll see if that happens or not. So,
all right.
And if you need to file bankruptcy, I'm your guy.
Rob, you want to promote anything?
I'm going to promote this. That's all.
That's significant.
All right. Visit our website at www.nodeodorant.com. You can check out our podcast on Apple Podcasts. Also, TuneIn Radio, YouTube, Stitcher, Google Play, all the places you can find podcasts. Please write reviews, rate our podcast. We appreciate it. And until next time, we'll say good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
For more information on the topics discussed in this episode, or to read our show notes and find us on social media, visit nodeodorant.com. For more information on Ryan Sean O'Reilly and his various works of fiction, visit RyanSeanO'Reilly.com. The theme music for this podcast was written by John Doyle from the band I Decline. You can visit him at i-decline.com. Voiceover for this podcast was provided by me, Margaret O'Reilly. concludes our episode. We hope you've learned a lot. Again, thanks for listening to our show. And always, always remember, there is no deodorant in outer space.
Yeah, it's kind of how I feel about our hotel room.
Yeah.
There's definitely a murder in there. At least a significant assault. I do that sometimes, too.
Huh?
I just yell sometimes, too.
Yeah.
Mostly in my car, and mostly at the dude in front of me who just braked for no reason or decided to slow down before he got in the turn.
Yours are sweaty.